In this part 2 of the product visualization in Blender series, we're going to do the texturing of this model. We're going to use mostly PBR image textures and then also use some Blender materials in there for the background and some of the other simpler pieces. So hopefully you followed along from part 1 and you have your model already created. And with that, let's get into the texturing. Okay, let's get started with the texturing of this 3D model. Hopefully you followed along with the part 1 video and you kind of already modeled this all out, but if not, feel free to grab this off of my Patreon. It should be there for free. You can download and follow along. So let's kind of get into the texturing. So the first big lesson that I've learned about texturing is you have to have good lighting to start, and there's no good way to see your materials without it. So just like the OP video, we're gonna do Shift A, Mesh Plane, rotate it on the X by 90 degrees, and then I'm going to move it back along the Y axis with GY, scale it up, and then the first material we're going to do is actually not a PBR material, but we're going to do a Blender material. So add a new material, set it to emission, to 2, and then I'm going to rename this to background just to keep it organized. And then what I kind of want to do now is set up the camera and the shader editor windows. So I always usually just drag this out here, drag out from the top, and then I'm going to just set up the camera. So I'm going to go into the front view on this view, Shift A, camera, and then in the camera I'm going to set the output in the output tab here to 1500 by 1500. That's a good resolution that I use for like Instagram. And then I'm going to go to the top view, just bring that back along the Y axis. And then just like in our other video, we're going to add in a controller to control the camera and the background. So on here, I'm going to do Shift A and add in an empty cube. I'm going to scale this up a little bit. Actually, I'll just leave it default size. And then I'm going to parent both of these to it. So grab this and this, Shift click, Control P, object, wrong thing, Control P, object, keep transform. Grab the plane and then that one, Control P, object, keep transform. We can just check that that's working. Go crazy. Okay, and then in this bottom view, we're going to make this our camera view. So I'm going to hit 0 on the numpad. I'm going to click N and T to hide that. One thing that I do like to have is composition guides for framing. So I'm going to click the camera, and then on the camera icon, click viewport display, turn on the composition guides for thirds. And then I'm going to turn off all the other things besides the composition guides. The way you do that is get rid of this button here and then leave this on, but basically just uncheck everything that you can see right here. You can just hold on one and click and everything else will go away, and that'll just give you those. And then I'm going to go ahead and set this to the rendered view. So this looks good, but you can tell that our model already has there's lighting on it besides just the white light, because there shouldn't be any light hitting the front of this theoretically. So one thing that we want to do is go into our world, set the strength to 0, and then that's going to give you that full background or that full backlit. I'm going to move this back in the Y a little bit and then scale it up to make sure it covers. And then also I like to save on some rendering resources. So I'm going to Control B, hover over that right there. Okay, now that the lighting's fixed, I kind of want to set up this scene to set up the camera angle that I want. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to bring this in, something like this. And then we're going to set up that first shot that you kind of saw if you saw the last video. So I'm going to rotate this in the Z, and then RXX to rotate it along its normal axis or its local axis. And then I'm going to rotate a little bit more, RZ. And then I'm going to make sure this focal length is set to 100 instead of 50. And then we're going to rotate this a little bit more on the X-axis, something like that, and then a little more on the Z. Just play around with something that you like the view of or like the camera angle. And then I'm going to scale this down a little bit. This doesn't change anything in the render. It's just I like to keep the camera kind of moved where it's not messing with me when I click here. So I'm going to GZZ, bring that in. So now we've got this set here. If you haven't saved your file, this would be a good time to save it. I'm just going to save incremental, which basically saves it with the exact same name and then adds like a 1, or it actually changed it from 3D model to 4D model. So this is a fancy 4D model, guys, like Cinema 4D. So, okay, now we kind of have the camera angle set up. Now what we're going to do next is set up some generic lighting. So basically I've got this backlight. You can see there's a little bit of a rim light kind of back here. But the thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to do Shift A, add in a lights area. I'm just going to bring it up. Basically, I kind of want to have like it as a key light. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the right hand view, rotate it, point it at something like that. Go back to the top, rotate a little bit, make sure it's pointing, hitting it something like that. Rotate a little bit more. And then kind of what I want to have this is right now it's mostly shining on this. So I'm going to rotate this and kind of bring this over to where it looks a little bit more like that. Cool. And then this is still pretty gray. You kind of want to get closer to those white values. So I'm going to shoot for 250 now to start off. That kind of gives you those nice white highlights. Again, like we said in the last video, the key to having renders that don't look like beginner ones is to have variation in your lighting. If I brought this out in here, changed the scale, way up, and it was a super huge light, and you just blasted it with let's just do 2000. I mean, this is good because you're not too far out. This is basically like a soft light, but if you use super big lights and everything has the exact same amount of light, it looks very beginner, flat and no contrast or anything. So like we said, we're going to try to go back to what we had here. So we're actually going to put it back something like this, and then I'm going to set up some more lights. I'm going to do G, Z, or actually I'm going to control Z, and that should bring it back to where we had it. So we're going to shift D, we're going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to rotate it around here like this. We kind of want some light from this side. I'm going to bring this down to 100 to start. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Let's go back to 75. That looks good. And then we're also going to need another light down here to kind of fill in some of this stuff. So I'm just going to shift this light again. And then in the top view, I'm going to bring it over. And then I'm going to double R to trackball rotate and then just kind of point it at here. And then I'm going to GZ, bring it down. I'm going to rotate it to point at it again. You can tell we're super washed out, so let's just change this to something like 20. And that's going to kind of give us a little bit of a highlight here. And then I honestly would just bring it over, something like that. That kind of gives you a little bit brighter at the back, but then also we kind of don't want it to fade into white at the back. So what we might do is just bring this over to something like this, but this just gives you enough lighting for now to start. So, okay, now we're going to get into the PBR set of textures. So I'm going to do a quick shout out and kind of tell you what I typically do. I use a set of materials from Grayscale Gorilla. I have my asset library set up to where I can just go to my materials and just grab them and drag and drop. If you don't know how to do that, there's tons of videos out there, or if you want me to make a video about that, let me know. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with doing a free method of PBR textures, and there's a great resource with free assets you can use. That's what we're going to start with. So again, I'm going to save my file just in case it crashes. I leave this rendered view up. I have a pretty beefy PC, but you might want to change this from rendered view to material preview. That's going to let us do some good work there, but I'm going to leave mine in rendered. I think it can handle it for now. So the first thing that we have to do before we apply any materials is we have to set up some UV mapping. I'm not going to go super into the weeds on this. I'm just going to use kind of the method that I use to make these renders. So what I did is I tabbed into edit mode, clicked A for everything, and then U, Q project. And basically what that's doing is it's just giving a set of directions on how the PBR textures can be applied. So now, what I did, just to show you for mine, I would go to my Grayscale Gorilla materials, go to my metal one, grab my aluminum brush material, just drag and drop, and then bam, it's already on there. I can go to the shader editor. I would bump this up to like 3. You can tell that those highlights were really strong. And then, like I said, now see how the light completely changes the way this looks. If I hide this light, this is super dark, and if I put it back, we could bring this down to like 5. And you can completely change the way that looks. Because right now that whole thing is washed out, so I don't get any detail. So that's just kind of showing you how important lights are. So I'm just going to put that back for a second, like that. And then I'm just going to bring it over. And then I'm also just going to go GZZ to kind of bring it away. Something like that. Just play around with this for a second. And then GZZ again. Cool. That's just something to mess with for now. But we can see this material has been applied. It looks really good, just kind of the way it is. But if you don't pay for Grayscale Gorilla assets, that's totally fine. Grayscale Gorilla is a company that makes super high quality assets. They are originally for Cinema 4D, which is kind of like the industry standard for 3D design, motion design. They've recently, within the last year or so, released all their stuff, which you can use for Blender. It is paid, so I wanted to go over some better materials that you can get for free if you don't want to pay for these, but I do highly recommend these. They are awesome materials. So the way that I would do it is I would use this website called Ambient CG. This is a CCO, which basically means you can use it for free in all your projects, and they have tons of materials. So what I did, I went to metal brushed on this website, and then I just grabbed this set of materials right here and then just downloaded them. When you do that, you can just download them, and in your downloads folder, just click them, extract them into a separate folder. And then what we can do now in Blender is let's just get rid of this material for now. So I'm gonna go to the material, get rid of it. We're back to this. So let's just say we want to make that material. We're gonna set it up from scratch, but then there's also this super cool add-on that comes with that website that's super easy and intuitive to use. So let's just set it up from scratch just to show you. So if you have Node Wrangler enabled in your add-ons, in your preferences, just go to your add-ons, search for Node Wrangler, and make sure that check is on. We're gonna use that. So we're going to make a new material from those images that we just downloaded. So new, and then we're going to set this to brushed metal, and then I'm going to put EPBR just to know where I got it. And then in here, I'm going to click on the principal BSDF and do Control-Shift-T. And then basically in your downloads folder, I got to go find my downloads folder here. Downloads, I'm going to take that folder of images that we downloaded, hit A to select everything, and do principal texture setup, and it will automatically set up all the nodes for you. And you can just tell this already looks really, really good. Those brushes are kind of strong, so what I would do is bump all three of these up to like maybe 3, and then you might even want to decrease this normal strength if it looks a little bit too grainy to you. So you can do like 0.1 and 0.2 on displacement. Also, if you don't want to use displacement, I would recommend just unplugging it. You can tell that big of a difference that made. So I'm actually going to plug it back in. It looks good. Actually, let's leave displacement unplugged, and then let's set this back to 1, which looks pretty good there. But if you do like the displacement, we can put it back there, and then I would bring this down even more. So let's say like 0.1, and then change this mid-level to 0.1 maybe. Nice. Yep, and that material already looks pretty good. Now, the other thing that we can do is I'm going to get rid of this material one more time and just show you. In the shader editor tab, you can download the EPBR add-on, which is their ambient CG plug. And then basically you can just load the library, and then instead of having to go to the website, you can just click metal, and then you can literally go on here and download any of these assets for free, directly plug them in. It's super cool. And then once you've downloaded them, it'll be saved in your local tab. So these are the 3 that I have sitting here right now. This one was just fun. I messed around with. We're actually going to use this metal one later for some different pieces. So, you can just click this, and then I don't know if you can drag or not, but if I just clicked on this object and then clicked the plus button for this and just clicked apply, bam, adds this material. So it's pretty cool. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that metal, and then I'm just going to add back the one that we made here because we already kind of edited it and it looked good. So now that's basically it. What we're going to do is do the rest of the material. So I'm going to basically make this brush material all along this. So a good way to do that is to grab all the pieces that you want. Actually, first, before we do this, these don't have, these were modeled from basic shapes, so they do have UV maps tied to them, but because we stretched things and extruded, they're not going to be right. So we're going to tab this Q projection on that. We're going to do the same thing on this guy, Q projection. We're going to do both of these washers. There's actually another one right there. So tab A, U, Q project. Okay. Now a quick way to apply these materials, the same if we're going to use this set of metal here, is just to click all the pieces that you want to have the metal or the same texture. So I'm going to grab all of these guys here, grab this last, and then Control L, link materials. And that's going to apply it to all of them. And then one thing that I do want to change is, if you know, this type of material would basically never be brushed along in this direction. It looks a lot better if it goes across. So the way that we can edit the way that the images are applied is in the UV editor. I'm not going to go crazy deep on this, but if you tab into the image editor and click A, you can grab all of your faces basically that the images are using, and then I'm going to rotate them and hold Control and just rotate them down to 90. I'm going to also save the file again so I don't lose anything. And then if I tab, now what I can do is I can move these with G. Basically you move them with all the same controls. And if I zoom in here, if you scale this up, this is basically going to do the same thing as reducing the scale. And I actually think this looks better with the reduced scale on this material here, because the brushes need to be a lot smaller. So that's the first separate pieces set up with this material. We're going to add a couple more. So for this guy right here, I'm actually gonna, and also you can see that this is not subdivided. I'm gonna right click and just shade auto smooth. That's gonna basically take care of most of it for now. But I'm gonna use the PBR again. You could go to the website and download them, but I've already got a local one saved. So I'm gonna grab that metal, and then while I have this piece selected right here, I can just click the apply button, and then bam, we got that nice little knob there. It's a little contrast to everything else. So cool, that's the brushed metal setup. And then the other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and grab this rib detail that we made, tab into edit mode. We're not gonna see it right now, but I'm gonna go ahead and control B and just give this 3 segments and give it a little bit of a rounded edge. And then I'm gonna Q project all of this again. And then I'm also just gonna click that knob and I'm gonna give that the same material, control L, link materials. And that changes a little bit the reflection inside, but you'll see it later in some different shots we might make. So yeah, that's gonna be that material added. And then now I gotta take care of this inside piece. The only other thing that you could do is if I did this on the other render was I took this face right here and hold Alt and click it, and then I did like Control plus one time, and then I actually added a new material and added that metal and then assigned it, and it gave it this kind of black ring here. You can kind of decide whether or not you want to do that. I actually don't like the way these two materials don't mix, so I'm not going to do that for this render. I'm going to put that back like that. But now we kind of have to set up this light on the inside. So the first thing I want to do is go to the bottom view. I'm going to hide this cover piece that we made. And then also this piece is really thick. I don't like the way I modeled that in the first video. So I'm going to hold Alt and click that inner ring. And then I'm going to scale Shift Z. And basically that's just going to let me scale it without making it go any taller or in the Z direction. So I'm going to just bring it down to something like this. It kind of makes more sense. And then in the bottom view, we're going to add some little points that'll be our LED lights. So I'm going to do Shift A, Mesh, Cube. It's way too big. I'm going to scale it down, something like this. Looks good. I'll go a little bit more. And I'm going to do GY and kind of bring it up here like this. And then I'm going to click period on my numpad key to rotate around it. You can tell it's clipping through the top. So I'm just going to bring it down. So like if you move it down, that point at which you see it kind of cuts through there. I'm just going to put it right above that. And then what I want to do is set the origin or the pivot point to the 3D cursor, which we already had set up in the middle of this. If not, you can just click it and do Shift S, 3D cursor to the selected. And then I'm going to do Shift D and R. And basically I just want to make 3 points kind of like in a triangle. So I'm going to rotate them out 120 degrees, holding Control, and then Shift R. And now I've got these 3 little pieces here. I'm going to tab. This totally does not have to be done, but I'm just going to give them a small bevel just in case we ever saw them. And then right click, shade auto smooth. Yeah, that wasn't worth it, but it doesn't matter. So what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna make a new material, call this our lights, or our lamp light, so we keep it straight. And then we're gonna change it from a principled BSDF to an emission. And then we're gonna crank that way up. We're gonna go with 10,000 for now. That gives you light inside. That looks really good actually the way it is. So then I'm gonna do Alt H. That puts back this piece that was our cover. So we need to make one more material for that. I'm gonna click new. We're gonna call this our light cover. And then in the shader editor, I'm going to take the transmission and go basically all the way up like that. I'm gonna drop the roughness down a little bit. And then that gives you those little bit of highlights you can kind of see in there. But then if you go back to your cube, actually we need to rename this. These are these pieces. So I'm gonna name this to the lamp light. And then also I'm going to move all of my lights and the empty controlling the camera. Click M, new collection, and then do LCA, which stands for lights, camera, action. Don't remember which Blender YouTuber I got that from, but I use it for basically everything. And then I'm going to move that camera into that collection. The lamp light goes in the top collection, and then this plane is the background. So I'm going to put that, I'm going to rename it first to background and move that into the lights, camera, action. That kind of cleans this up. I could just change this collection to our model. Yep, that gives you nice pieces where you can go find whatever you need. Cool. Now that is the texturing for this model. I was going to try to do the scene setup and everything in one video, but honestly this is pretty close to the first setup. We can do some light tweaking on the way that our lights are set up, try to give some more shadows, some more detail. You can tweak the brightness of your lamp lights if you want them to be even brighter. You know, you could throw this, make this a 5 or something, see if that changes the way it looks inside. And then I would also do test renders. I kind of like it to where it's not completely blown out. So you can tell if I go back to 1, you can still see that there's highlights of those in there. Those little details kind of carry some weight when you do renders like this. But yeah, this is the materials that we're going to use for basically all of the renders that we did in the beginning in part 1 that you saw. I may put them on the screen here. We go out of here. We're just going to rotate around this and look. The only other thing that we will do while I'm looking at it is I'm going to go into over here. And then what I do want to do is change this material by clicking this face. Let's click new, and then let's just pick one of these materials that we've already added. So if we did this dark metal, that's the same metal. Let's do new, and then let's do this black metal, and then tab and click. Actually, let's do Control plus to kind of go down a little bit and click assign. That's going to give you that little detail. And then we also want to change this ring from being metal. So I'm going to click tab again, and then I'm going to click period to zoom into it. And I'm going to grab this, hold Alt on this face right here, grab this set of loops, Control plus, bring that down. And then I'm going to create one more material. We're going to click new. And then what I'm going to do is kind of a weird mix, but it worked when I did it, is I'm going to turn this transmission up, but then also set the emission to like 3. And if we go out of edit mode, we have to turn that even up more. But we can play around with the way this looks. Let's set this to like 50 or 60. See how that looks. Oh, we didn't assign it. No wonder it didn't change. So we're going to click this material, click assign. So now you've got that little thing going on. I just think that looks cool. You can play with this transmission, kind of make it look like it's plastic or the way it looks. But then we'll do some shots and you can kind of like change this emission strength from 0 to, you know, 60, and you can make it look like it's turning on, or you can do whatever you want to do there. So that's kind of what I did. And then also one other trick that I thought you might want to use: don't always just use your materials the way they are by default. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this brushed metal, and then I'm going to go to the color. And then what I could actually do is, if you wanted to completely ignore these colors, you could just unplug. Actually, let me see if I can get to a view that makes this look a little bit better. Yeah, so if I unplug the base color, that's going to put it back to basically white. And then if I wanted to just, you know, say I don't want it to be quite that dark, I want it to be something more like that, you could basically change that. Now, that's going to change all the other ones, but feel free to use either color ramps. Like, you could go crazy, like make this red. You can do whatever you want to do. So that is a good trick, to not just always take them at their default value. It does help because technically this has different colors baked in. So you probably would want to keep that in mind when you do that. It's going to look more realistic with this. But if you wanted to ditch that and you wanted this to be, you know, not quite as bright, and you want to just kind of differentiate between those two, you could do that. So yeah, and that's basically the texturing for this model. If you go back into this view, you can see what it looks like. Hopefully in part 3, what we're going to do is set up the different views. I had a view where it was a top angled view. We might even do some animation. And then one thing that I did want to cover is Blender volumetrics, which basically gives you this cool fog. I'll throw it up on the screen now. But yeah, this is the texturing that I did for this model. It's pretty simple as far as the, you know, projection and the materials, but now you should be able to go and either download the free materials that I showed you from EPBR, which is from Ambient CG. Go download that link, or you can just download the images and set it up with the Node Wrangler add-on. But if you do a lot of Blender work, I highly recommend setting up your asset library, and then it just lets you do all kinds of cool stuff. So let's just throw this painted metal on here. It's just me playing around for fun now. It looks pretty cool. You can do, obviously you'd have to go into the shader editor and then change these different, you know, things like this. Change this up to like 20, something like that. But you would go through and play with all these different things. It's super cool to be able to have all these saved in your asset browser and just add them in on the fly. So hopefully you enjoyed that video. In the next one, we're going to go through some of the setup on the scenes and different things that we do. And if not, feel free to check out the first Blender product design series where we went through a whole design. And with that, I will see y'all in the next video.